This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country and join their calls for justice. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land.
All right, I'm with Osman Faruqi, Australia's Hunter Biden, famously. And I don't know, did you see this interview that Hunter did with Andrew Callahan, is it, or whatever, who does like YouTube series Channel 5? And Hunter Biden, he fucking went off, yo. He's holding nothing back.
I love this interview. I mean, first thing I got to say is Hunter Biden looking good for 55.
I mean, it is cool to see Hollywood actors voice more progressive opinions, but
fuck him. Fuck him and everybody around him. I don't have to be fucking nice. Number one, I agree with Quentin Tarantino. Fucking George Clooney is not a fucking actor. He is a fucking, I don't know what he is. He's a brand. And by the way, and God bless him. You know what? He supposedly treats his friends really well. You know what I mean? Buys them things. And he's got a really great place in Lake Como. And he's great friends with Barack Obama. Fuck you. What do you have to do with fucking anything? Why do I have to fucking listen to you? What right do you have to step on a man who's given 52 years of his fucking life to the service of this country and decide that you, George Clooney, are going to take out basically a full-page ad in the fucking New York Times?
Hunter Biden has launched a scathing attack against George Clooney for leading the public charge on calling for the elderly president to bow out. Fuck you, he said, in reference to Clooney. What do you have to do with fucking anything? Why do I have to fucking listen to you? Now, I did a bit of research. In June 2024, George Clooney organized an event which raised $30 million for Joe Biden's re-election campaign. So there's that. Also, I'd say, Hunter Biden, why the fuck do we have to listen to you? You're Hunter
exactly.
Biden,
I mean,
for God's sakes.
It was interesting that George Clooney had seemingly such like an outsized impact on the future of the Democratic Party when he wrote that piece for the New York Times, but he seems to be bankrolling the party kind of single-handedly. So he probably has more of a right in terms of what happens to the future of the Democrats than the failson of Joe Biden.
But also he was correct. Is Hunter Biden seriously hanging on to the idea that Joe Biden would have been fine or that he would have won in 2024? Do you think, is the Biden family still that delusional?
I think even if Hunter himself personally thinks that Joe wasn't ready for a second tilt, he's not going to say that. I kind of respect the loyalty he's got, to the Biden family name. I don't expect Hunter to go out in this interview and, talk about crack cocaine and then say, yeah, by the way, my dad should have stepped down for Kamala. I think he can do one or the other. I think doing both is maybe too much.
Well, he said that the cocaine that they found in the White House wasn't his, man. He's been sober since 2019. It wasn't his. So he's still pretty good. Speaking of drugs, this was another interesting part of the interview. Hunter Biden said his father's disastrous debate performance against President Donald Trump was the result of him taking Ambien due to his travel. Less than a month after that June 27th, 2024 debate, Joe Biden stepped aside as presidential candidate after having trailed Trump in the polls. I know exactly what happened in that debate, Hunter Biden said. He, Joe Biden, flew around the world, basically the mileage he could have flown around the world 3 times. He's 81 years old. He's tired as shit. I'm like, yeah, I guess so. I guess he would be. He's famously sleepy Joe Biden, so that kind of makes sense.
I mean, he probably could have done with some crack in that instance.
They gave him Ambien to be able to sleep. He gets up on the stage and he looks like he's a deer in the headlights. At various points throughout the YouTube interview, Hunter Biden took aim at the Democratic Party for how it dealt with his father. We watched Joe Biden turn 80 and 81 and then 82, Hunter Biden said. We watched him get old in front of our eyes. That does not mean that you're incapacitated.
It kind of does.
You're right. The loyalty is kind of sweet, I guess.
Yeah, but when he said that bit, 80, 81, 82, it's like, that's exactly why this guy shouldn't have run for president again, man. Like, we should not have watched him age that old in the White House. You're kind of telling on yourself, my man.
Do you ever feel tempted? I mean, we may discuss your particular relative who's involved in Australian politics, but have you ever felt this compunction to get out there and defend Mehreen Faruqi and everything she does as a politician and assert your right as the child of a politician to weigh in on important matters?
I think Mehreen Faruqi is doing fine. I think an intervention from me in an interview as chaotic as this would do her more harm than good. I think I dragged down the Faruqi family name, perhaps not as much as Hunter Biden does, vis-a-vis the Biden family name. But I know what I do. I know the lane that I'm in, and my mother is in another lane, and she's doing fine.
It's very sweet.
The fact is that the Greens in a number of states have been taken over by a cult, a transgender and queer cult.
We're stuck with the hosts of Chapo Shithouse podcast.
Serious danger to Australia.
All right, everybody, let's do it. It's Serious Danger. This is a podcast about green politics in Australia. It is not an official Greens Party podcast, even if we're Greens members and we're talking to the children of Green senators. It is produced by Michael the Griffin, Tom Ballard with you. Emerald is off this week. We still like each other. Don't worry, we're not trying to avoid each other. I'm still in Canada. I'm in my final week of little holidays in the beautiful country of Canada, in Montreal. And I'm joined by returning guest co-host Osman Faruqi. Oz, thank you and welcome back to the show.
Tom, thank you so much for having me on. It's a real pleasure. I'm really excited to talk to you today.
Great to see you podcasting again. Tell us, congratulations, first of all, and tell us about your new media project that I'm enjoying very much, Lamestream, with your good friend Scott Mitchell.
Thank you, Tom. I mean, I feel like you and I was trying to think the first time we met. I know we've been friends for like at least a decade by now, I would say. And in that kind of time, I've worked for big media companies, small media companies all over the country, right? And I've had some fun, I've done some good things, I've met some good people, but I've also kind of walked away from that experience with a very, very, very healthy and large dose of cynicism and kind of pessimism, right? About how the media operates in this country, and that it's not going to be a new idea to you or to Emerald or to your listeners. There are huge problems with the corporate media landscape. And Scott Mitchell, who you mentioned, and we first met working at the ABC together about 8 years ago. Both of us, like a lot of our peers and contemporaries in the Australian media industry, realized that these institutions had fallen from the values that they used to stand by, from the work that they used to do, and audiences had figured that out. So we thought, well, we still care about journalism. We still care about media. We think media plays a very important role in this country for the good and the bad. And we wanted to make something ourselves. We wanted to use the skills and the connections and the experience that kind of we'd built up working in the media for the past 10, 15 years and try to make something that helps people understand why the media operates the way that it does, critique some of the obvious dumb shit that the media does. And I think in a way that I think to make us a little bit different to some of the other podcasters or news influencers out there, we want to break and report our own stories as well. So it's a bit of investigative journalism. It's a lot of media critique. It's some gags. I have this ongoing bit where I think every podcast starts with a concept and then devolves into being just like a movie podcast. And the fact that Scott and I are two bros who love cinema, I think we're probably ahead of schedule on that. But it's been really fun. We've had an awesome response for the last couple of months that we've been up and running and taking inspiration from so many people who got into the political podcast space before us, including you guys at Serious Danger.
Oh my gosh, that's so sweet. You're so welcome. It's a pleasure to be an inspiration. It's really good. If people like Serious Danger, they're going to like Lamestream. And I mean, this week's episode was a great example of talking about the way the media is approaching the genocidal war in Israel, all the way through to what's going on with the Hottest 100 and the problems facing Triple J in the Australian music industry. So at Lamestream Pod, check them out, support Oz and Scott. It's a fantastic show and great to have you with us on this thing.
Yeah, very Ballard-coded episode we had this week.
Yes. It was firmly up my white, chubby alley, so thank you. There's a lot of news this week. We're going to try and touch on all of it if we can. We got the Tasmanian state election, what happened in the first week of the 48th Parliament. We're so excited about the 48th Parliament. It's fantastic. And people are getting expelled from the Greens, ? We're going to talk about all of it. Quick shout out to our patrons. Thank you very much for supporting the show. Isaac, Green Sigmas, and Bernie. We appreciate you very much indeed. For just $3 a month, you get bonus content. And we just put out a Patreon episode this week, Emerald's chat with the psychologist and former Greens candidate Jocelyn Brewer about Australia's broken mental health care system, whether we can fix it, whether anyone can have good mental health while we're living under the horrors of capitalism. That's a fantastic conversation. Check that out.
Greens candidate and former Osman's high school debating coach, Jocelyn
What the?
Brewer.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, it's a small world, my friend. Small world.
Jesus. It is very incestuous. If you cannot...
Really just told him myself there about doing high school debating. I'm sorry.
Very cool, bro. If you can't chip in any cash right now to support the show, that's totally fine. We just ask that you recommend the show. Take your favorite episode of Serious Danger, send it to a friend who you think is on the same vibe, and say, hey, subscribe to this show because it's fantastic. Thank you.
Tasmania's fourth election in just 7 years has delivered another hung parliament. The Liberals have again won the most seats, but falling shy of a majority will be forced to negotiate with a largely progressive crossbench to try to form government. After triggering the early election with a no-confidence motion against Liberal Premier Jeremy Rockliff, Labor appears to have suffered a voter backlash and is likely to have recorded its lowest primary vote in more than a century. But Labor leader Dean Winter is defiant and isn't ruling out trying to govern with crossbench support.
All right, last weekend, Lucha Tasmania went to the polls for their second election in just 16 months, and it all proved to be a giant waste of fucking time. Did you follow the Tasmanian state election very closely, Oz?
I did weirdly closely for a man who has no real connection to Tasmania other than, going to Mona a couple of times over the past 5 years. It's second election in 16 months. Second election in 16 months triggered by a debate over this fucking stadium that these people can't figure out. It's completely crazy. The last election was triggered by the stadium because two Liberals quit. They opposed the deal the government had done with the AFL. And this time it was triggered by this no confidence motion that was about a lot of things, but the stadium was a key part of that. Trying to explain this to people who aren't following, you sound like a madman being like, so that they all want this team and it's great. Everyone kind of wants this team, but the AFL wants the Tasmania to bankrupt themselves by building the stadium, and it just keeps paralyzing the entire country. It keeps paralyzing the entire state political system and the economy. It's a wacky situation. I'm very excited to talk to you about it.
We've talked about it a few times on the show. Yes, it seems that Tasmanians want the team, but they don't want the stadium. And I've seen that the Pro Stadium campaign now has sorted out stickers that say yes team and yes stadium as well. So they've put those two positions together on the one sticker,
Smart
which
branding.
is
Smart
great
branding.
stuff. But yes, the state election. The state election was triggered after Dean Winter and Tasmanian Labor. They called for a vote of no confidence in Liberal Premier Jeremy Rockliff. They said it was because of the handling of the state's budget. Basically, according to Treasury, Tassie is on track for $13 billion worth of debt by 2028. And also, according to Labor, it was also because of the Liberal plans for austerity and privatisation in order to sort of balance the budget, I suppose. That motion of no confidence was eventually supported by the Greens and some members of the crossbench. The Speaker, who is a member of the Labor Party, ended up breaking the tie and voted in favour as well. So no confidence, and eventually we end up with an election on Saturday of last week. Now, voting is still continuing. It's supposed to be completed by August the 2nd, but here's what we sort of know so far. There are 35 seats in the Parliament. You need 18 seats to govern in your own right. And the results are thus. There was a 3% swing to the Liberal Party, giving them 14 seats, 13% swing against Labor, giving them a primary vote of 25.9%, which gets them 10 seats, but is the worst primary vote in more than 100 years for the party in that state. Womp womp. There was a small swing to the Greens. We held on to all 5 of our seats. Congratulations. I know there's lots of Tasmanian comrades who listen to the show, so well done there. I know it would have taken a lot to turn that campaign around at such short notice, and hanging on to all the seats, given the broader context about recent elections and how the party's been going, is pretty massive. So thumbs up for that. 4 independents were elected, including the anti-salmon farm advocate Peter George. And at the time of recording, 2 seats remain in doubt. That's sort of the lay of the land. Jeremy Rockliff has said this result was a re-endorsement of the Liberal government and that Tasmanian MPs should respect the will of the people. But again, it's extremely similar to the last Parliament, and so it's very hard to get any specific message out of it. It's probably going to end up in a Liberal minority government. You'd have to guess at this point, although there is still a chance that Labor could form a government if they get support of the Greens and what is generally a progressive crossbench. So those are the results, Oz. What should we make of all this?
All right. So this is great, Tom, because every psephologist, analyst, historian I've heard or spoken to or read is just like, this is one of the weirdest and strangest election results, not just because of the kind of numbers in Parliament, but because one particular party, the Labor Party, seems very, very scared of trying to form government. And that's even weirder when you consider that they are the reason there was an election, right? Presumably they called an election.
Yes.
Hoping that they would be able to form government. And they've ended up with a status quo situation, and they're just kind of like refusing to engage with it. I think Labor's kind of put themselves into a corner here. I think calling an election or putting forward the no confidence motion, that's actually fine. I don't have any problem with that. The Liberals are running the state. You think they're running it pretty badly. Call an election. It's a hung parliament. That's totally valid.
Sure.
The first mistake, though, was their campaign, right? They're saying that the Liberal Party is running the state into the ground. They didn't make any case for what they would do differently on all the key issues. They said that they backed the stadium. They said that they wanted to continue old growth logging. They want to continue salmon farming. They're back all of Tasmania's primary industry. So on basically every key question, the two parties are aligned, right? So there's no real reason for voters to swing away from Rockcliffe and to Labor. I think the result that the Greens and the Independents got is actually really impressive, particularly considering that this was an election brought on early in the context of a hung parliament, right? So you normally would imagine that people would say, okay, I'm sick of this chaotic nonsense. I'm going to vote for one of the major parties to just sort this out. They didn't. They gave the Greens a small swing and they held on to their 5 seats, and they elected more progressive independents than they had in the last parliament. That is a pretty fascinating and really interesting result. So what does that mean? I mean, Dean Winter is saying, I've got the most seats, so I should be able to form government. The problem is Labor and the Greens together, and they have previously formed a coalition in Tasmania, though that has not really been the vibe for the last decade or so. Labor and the Greens have more seats than Dean Winter. So they could just say, hey, actually, we have the right to form government. And then you throw in the 3 progressive independents. There is a clear progressive majority in Tasmania for government. The only thing stopping that happening is Labor Party and Dean Winter were saying, even though we called an election to get rid of Jeremy Rockcliffe, we'd actually just rather he govern because we're too scared to do it with the Greens and Independents. It's a really sad result because the voters have sort of said, this is the Tasmania we want, and Labor is refusing to engage with that. That's kind of my take on the situation at the moment.
No, Oz, they're happy to form government with the Greens as long as the Greens don't get anything whatsoever, no deal whatsoever, as long as they just give us their support for nothing in return. You know how politics is supposed to work. Then they're happy to accept that support. I mean, fucking hell, the gall of this guy. He gets up and he says, after the results, tonight the Tasmanian people have spoken and they've delivered another hung parliament, and with it a resounding message that they want their politicians to work together more collaboratively. But what I do want to reiterate is that Tasmanian Labor will not do deals with the Greens. I repeated that hundreds of times during the election campaign, and I will not change. Who are you, Dean Winter? Make it make sense, bro. What the fuck?
I mean, it's incredible. We haven't talked about the way that Tasmania's electoral system works. I mean, and here's the thing. If Labor is saying we're only going to govern if we get a majority, they will never govern for the rest of Tasmania's existence. They may as well just put themselves out of business. That's not how the Tasmanian parliament operates, not how the electoral system operates. It's ridiculous hubris. And you're right. It's like them saying on one hand, oh, we recognize what the voters have said, but we're ruling out working with the only party and the only people who could actually put us in government. This is the fundamental issue Labor has, right, in Tasmania and around the country, that their voter base probably wants them to work with the Greens rather than have a Liberal government in power. But the Neanderthals in charge of the party hate the Greens so much that they're not willing to do it. And who loses, Tom? Not to get too earnest about it. Who loses? The people of Tasmania, the environment of Tasmania. On a national level, who loses? The people of Australia, the environment of Australia. It's actually infuriating, but also just really sad, because what is the model for progressive change in this country? Realistically, it is Labor and the Greens working together. The Greens seem willing to do that, and Labor just would literally rather the Liberals govern than try to give that a go. It's fucking insane.
Happy to do that. I mean, again, being lectured constantly about, Labor is all about whatever means necessary, and it's all about power, and you need power to change things. But apparently, when it comes along, you have an opportunity to form a government. In theory, no, we can't, because the great principle of not working with the Greens, is more important than any of that.
That's so funny you mentioned that. Like on my bookshelf, I'm looking at. I've got a copy of Whatever It Takes, the book by Graham Richardson,
right.
Who in the book he talks about his Labor power broker, who talks about cutting the first preference deal with the Greens, and it was over the Tasmanian forests issue.
Yes.
So this is the party of ruthless pragmatists, but not ruthless enough to actually form fucking government. It's mental.
We will back in a genocide. We will open up a carbon bomb, but we will not have a constructive negotiation with a party to our left. That is completely impossible. Now, having said that, I guess you ask the question, okay, what would the deal look like? Because the Greens are against the stadium, right? And if the stadium is like the issue in Tasmanian politics right now, that's defining this in so many different ways. I mean, what is the compromise position? You either have a stadium or you don't. Like, what would that even look like, I suppose? I guess I don't really know.
I find that I find the stadium stuff kind of confusing, to be honest. Like that there seem to be multiple stadiums that currently exist, and the situation is, they should build a better stadium or upgrade those stadiums. The Greens are sort of like, well, no, we've actually just upgraded one. It's fine. And the thing is, it is fine. Like they play AFL in Tasmania now, like they do. The Hawthorn Hawks have like a deal to play a set number of games. So there's no massive crisis. The AFL is just like, well, we may as well squeeze this government for, $1 to $1.8 billion, and we can put a roof over it, and we can play cricket there, and we can have concerts there. It's a cash grab from the AFL. So I think that's what makes it frustrating is there actually is a way. Tasmania could just say, hey, we don't want to spend this much money. We still want this team. And if the fucking AFL want to reject the team on that basis, let them do it. Let Tasmanians be angry at the private school boys from Melbourne who run the AFL. Like, that's a valid thing to do. The government doesn't have to collapse because the losers in charge of the AFL are trying to squeeze them for $1 billion. Like, it's the lamest shakedown in history. These guys are a bunch of dweebs.
Yeah. Yeah, and particularly, amongst the broader context, which I think the Greens are trying to make the point, is like Tassie's health system and education system is in pretty dire straits, right? And obviously the state's finances are a major concern. But yeah, it's like I completely understand people saying, sure, we like AFL and a team would be cool, but our kids can't read and we can't get to a fucking hospital. So maybe there's some other priorities going on,
I mean, it's funny, but it is true and it is so sad. Tasmania has I think the highest illiteracy rate in the country.
Yeah.
And there's serious like economic dislocation. And even Greens people, right? You want to end the devastating kind of industrial practices that have destroyed that state. But if you're going to do that, you then need to create jobs or transition mechanisms and funding for people who used to rely on those industries. That takes money. Is that a better use of money, or is building a gold-plated stadium with a retractable roof a good use of Tasmanian taxpayer dollars? It seems pretty obvious what the right thing here is to do.
All right, we should get the full results next week from August the 1st, I believe. But once again, congrats and solidarity to all the Tasmanian Greens comrades out there putting in the good fight. Tabitha Badger, the best named Greens MP in the country, is still in the parliament, which is good news. Congratulations to Rosalie Woodruff and everybody else.
Tom, can I quickly shout out, they went viral on social media, but Rosalie Woodruff's woke henchmen on either side.
Oh,
you saw that photo?
I didn't see that. No, what's that?
I believe they were her daughters. Politicians take their families on stage when and she's delivered. They had two daughters wearing like Palestinian keffiyehs around their necks and just standing on either side of her. It went ballistic on social media. It was a sick photo. Shout out to the Woodruff family.
Nice.
I want to go to the issue that Senator Faruqi asserts this is about before I come back to the issue of procedure. When it comes to the conflict in Gaza, Australians are understandably distressed by the violence, including the deaths of so many innocent civilians. But they also know that Australia is not responsible for what is happening in the Middle East. And in this place yesterday, Senator Faruqi went a step further. She disrespected the rules of the Parliament by holding up a sign for the duration of the Governor-General's address on the opening of this term of Parliament. Do you know what that address is about? It's all about our country. But Senator Faruqi wanted it to be about her, presumably in her campaign for the leadership of the Greens. The reality is this is a very difficult conflict. I have often spoken in this place about the need for all of us to be responsible about how we deal with it here.
Gaza is starving. Words won't feed them. Sanction Israel. And I will not back down from this call, because Palestinians are being murdered, starved, and displaced by Israel as we speak. And all you can do is crack down on people who protest, who tell the truth, who hold up a mirror to you all for your silence and complicity. Labour and the coalition in this chamber wants to avoid the truth. You don't want to see it or hear it. And now here we are. You want to force me to apologise for telling the truth. Well done. You can all pat yourselves on the back and move on while Palestinians are slaughtered. You know what? One day you will all have to explain to your children and grandchildren where you stood when tens of thousands of men, women, and children were being slaughtered. And I wouldn't like to be in your shoes then, because you are all on the wrong side of history. Instead of sanctioning me, maybe you should think about sanctioning Israel.
All right, to national news. The 48th Parliament is here, everybody. Oz, are you excited about all the progressive patriotism that is about to be unleashed by the 48th Parliament?
I'm drowning in progressive patriotism. Tom, can you tell me why it took them like nearly 3 months between the election and actually getting Parliament back together? You think Labor's like, we've got this huge majority, time to change the country, and then they just fucked around for 2.5 months
to actually call the Parliament? That's a good point. Well, the counting did take ages, to be fair, and of course they needed to approve the Northwest Shelf gas project. That was really important.
Oh, true.
They needed to get that in. That was the focus. That's what everyone was working towards, and turning a blind eye to genocide. So you're very busy. You can't be sitting for Parliament when you're
busy stuff. Yeah,
making the world a worse place. Yeah. But they eventually did. The new Parliament sat for the first time since the election this week. We got a total of 123 Labor members in there, which is pretty amazing still. 70 Coalition members and 11 Greens. Was at a time of recording. Someone might have defected by the time this comes out. The members were sworn in, we got some first speeches, and we witnessed some true bullshit. We might start with the funniest stuff. I don't know if you saw this. Maverick MP Bob Katter appeared to nod off on the first day of the new Parliament, looking like he was catching up on some sleep during Governor-General Sam Mostyn's address to Parliament. While Miss Mostyn was outlining Labor's ambitious second-term agenda, the Kennedy MP looked to be snoozing. Affectionately known as the father of the House, Mr. Katter appeared to wake up after parliamentarians applauded Miss Mostyn's speech and followed suit. Earlier on Tuesday, Mr. Katter also ditched tradition by refusing to swear allegiance to King Charles, his heirs and successors, stating his allegiance was to the Australian people. Okay, so we've got our own Joe Biden situation going on here, it seems. And he's on Ambien, I assume.
Sleepy Bob.
But I couldn't believe this swearing in story. Wasn't it the end of the world when Lidia Thorpe didn't swear in properly and everyone lost their fucking minds?
Firstly, Bob Katter, welcome to the resistance, right? Great stuff. Fuck the king. I had two reactions to this, Tom. I was like, did we know Bob Katter hated the monarchy? I had zero understanding of Bob's praxis on the issue of a republic or whatever. And then secondly, exactly what you just said. When Lidia Thorpe did this, people lost their fucking minds. And it's still, I think it still is a big part of this narrative of how she's disrespectful and doesn't respect Parliament. She shouldn't be there. Bob Katter does it, and everyone's kind of oh, that's just classic cheeky Bob. Let's not worry about it. And it's sort of kind of frustrating in a way to even talk about it, because obviously you and I agree with the kind of political intent of what Lidia and Bob Katter are doing here.
Yeah.
But the double standards from the media and from politicians is so fucking blatant. And I think it plays into a bunch of other things that happened this week. It's just we're not going crazy, right? These people are the crazy ones. We're right for pointing this out. I have to keep reminding myself of that when you see this stuff happen. And it seems so incongruous.
So bizarre. How does anyone who covered the Lidia Thorpe story rationalize this? I mean, because I think Lidia had to go back and do it again, didn't she? And swear in properly or whatever the fuck. And then later said,
there were pieces in the British media about this, about, the uprising of Indigenous senators against the Queen. This was a global news story. It's completely crazy.
Wild. One Nation's increased Senate presence of 4 members also staged a silent protest during the Welcome to Country acknowledgements. Party leader Pauline Hanson, Malcolm Roberts, and new additions, Western Australia Senator Tyrone Whitten and New South Wales Senator Warwick Stacey, we've discussed them, they're fucking mental, turned their backs away from the chamber during the acknowledgement. The protest lasted for about 5 seconds and did not appear to interrupt proceedings. So they're still hanging on to this. The amount of time and effort that right-wing people are pouring into bitching and moaning and getting triggered by Welcome to Countries seems to continue apace. I guess they think they're onto a winner here.
Yeah, I think sadly, we're going to see more of this, because One Nation's actual presence in the Senate, even though they've got more representatives now, they don't really have any relevance in terms of the way that the numbers work, right? The Greens have the balance of power. So what is One Nation going to do to get attention? They're going to do stuff like this. Remember when Pauline Hanson wore a burqa? I just feel like they're going to pick these culture war issues and just go really hard and try and fracture the Liberal Party, the Nationals, even further. It's obviously completely pathetic, but I feel like we're in for a long 3 years with this mob.
Am I crazy? Like I'm still amazed. At the start of every time we post our episodes to YouTube, our episodes begin with an acknowledgement of country that lasts for, I believe, about 6 seconds. And still the number of people that like to comment or give feedback that's and they can't possibly listen to this podcast. It's like too painful. It's too woke and all this bullshit. Like the moaning from people and how upset people get about the acknowledgement of the fact that we're a colonized country and that this land was stolen, just like basic historical facts. And people will shit their fucking pants about it.
I mean, if people think that is like woke bullshit, wait till they listen to the rest of your podcast. Honestly, that's like my first. But yeah, I mean, obviously, in an Australian context, hating the welcome to kind of hating the acknowledgement of country has become, I guess, a bit of a signifier of like, I'm one of those return guys. Like I want Australia to retain its kind of white European heritage. It's become a relatively, and it shouldn't be, like, don't get me wrong. I think it's crazy and like deeply racist for people to criticize it, but it's become a politically acceptable way to criticize like diversity and criticize kind of the idea that Australia needs to reckon with colonialism. So now you can say, I just think it's all gone too far with Welcome to Country, and the Daily Mail and news.com.au will write stories up about you. And I think it's pretty insidious, frankly, because it is not about saving time. It's not about woke bullshit going too far. It's about contempt for First Nations people. It's what it is about.
And also when it's like, they said, it's gone, I don't mind a Welcome to Country, but it's gone too far. Okay, like that's bullshit, whatever. But it's like, if you can't do it at the opening of a new parliament, for fuck's sake, like what other possible time is acceptable for these people? But anyway.
100%.
That was all bullshit. The biggest bullshit of all, of course, was this. The Green Senator Mehreen Faruqi has been sanctioned after the upper house agreed her decision to protest the Governor-General's address to Parliament by raising a Gaza protest sign was utterly disrespectful. Faruqi held up the sign urging sanctions against Israel while the Governor-General, Sam Mostyn, addressed Parliament on Tuesday. As Anthony Albanese left the upper house chamber, Faruqi asked, Prime Minister, Gaza is starving. Will you sanction Israel? The government responded by moving a motion condemning Senator Faruqi's disrespectful protest, which was highly inappropriate and undermines our democratic system, that she should refrain from inflammatory and divisive actions which reflect poorly on the Senate, and that she should apologise. Faruqi is now banned from taking part in any overseas parliamentary delegations for the remainder of the 48th Parliament, a move which the Green Senator said showed Labor was cracking down on people who speak out against a genocide. A disgrace all round, I would say. I'm fascinated to hear your thoughts, Osman Faruqi.
Well, firstly, I'm very sad that she can't go on any of these overseas jaunts. I was hoping to get, a sort of family and friends pass to Tel Aviv on the next one of these Senate trips that they all go on. I actually really interested and really glad you said when the Prime Minister was walking past, Mehreen said, Prime Minister, Gaza is starving. Will you sanction Israel? Most of the reporting I saw of that comment was just Senator Faruqi heckled Albanese as he walked past, right? And I feel like, heckle versus the actual words in that context have quite different meanings. I'm also glad that we talked about the Qatar stuff and the One Nation stuff before this, because those three things happen in the same day, I believe, or the same 2 days of Parliament. Yeah. Only one of those, the government decided to issue a censure against, and the coalition tried to actually suspend Mehreen for it as well. That didn't get up. Labor drew the line at that. Again, the decisions Labor is making on what they decide to fire up about, I think, are really telling, and I think they clearly have convinced themselves that their position on Israel, where they're trying to walk this line by occasionally expressing concern for what's going on, but fundamentally remaining politically, militarily, economically tied to Israel. They think that is like an electoral winner. And they think by attacking the Greens in this way and painting them as extremists or whatever, they think they're on to a kind of vote success there. Now, regardless of whether that might be true or maybe it's not true, is it the right thing to do? I think that's a whole separate question. And in terms of the anger that they had, the language that they used about this demeaning democracy and undermining the parliamentary system and the Governor General being disrespected, who cares about the Governor General's address? And like these addresses, right? They're like hostage videos. The Governor General reads out a statement that the government prepares for them about like Labor's agenda in this term of parliament. It's ridiculous. No one cares about it. And the one thing Penny Wong
Bob
did
fell
say,
asleep for fuck's sake.
Yes.
It's a snooze fest, guys. You're bombing. The Governor
It's
General
literally a
was
snooze
bombing.
fest.
Okay.
The one thing that Penny Wong, I think, is kind of right about here is, she's like, Senator Faruqi was doing this for attention, right? She was saying Senator Faruqi was doing this for personal attention. That's not true. Senator Faruqi was doing it for attention. She was using the fact that there was this attention on that. She was using the fact that there was people paying attention to the Governor General in Parliament, and there were cameras there to bring attention to the forced starvation of innocent people in Gaza. And she succeeded in doing that.
Yes.
And there is nothing wrong with doing that. That is what politicians do all the fucking time. That is what they do. That is their job to do that. And I think this was I actually think this is a strategic fuck up from Labor. I think they thought, we're drawing a red line here. We're repeating our election strategy of saying we're in the middle. The coalition's crazy on Israel in that direction. The Greens are crazy in that direction. We're in the middle. I think all this served to do was to highlight the need and the demand to sanction Israel. And it exposed them for being deeply out of touch because they have now censured a politician opposing genocide more than they've censured the government committing genocide. It was not a smart move from them, in my view.
You couldn't write it, could you? Yeah, God. I mean, this drove me crazy. Yeah, it's all about attention. Anthony Albanese's like, oh, Mehreen Faruqi, you just want to make it all about her. That's a critique you could make about literally any political action, right? Any protest, running for parliament, giving a speech. It's like, I'm sorry, political acts need to be performed by people, by human beings, okay?
Yes.
Now, you say like, oh, yes, the Greens just want to get a social media moment or get attention. Or, okay, another alternative theory, maybe she actually believes it. Maybe she's actually seeing the images come through that we all are. Maybe she's reading the news, for God's sakes, and hearing about and seeing those horrific, heartbreaking images of children being starved to skeletons. Like, we've all seen this. And maybe she, like millions of other Australians and billions of people around the world, are seeing that what the Western world is doing in regards to Israel in Gaza right now is completely unacceptable. It's not working. The situation is continuing. And maybe we need to do absolutely everything to stop that, even that if that includes interrupting a fucking speech with a little sign. Yeah, I reckon that's probably justified.
Yeah, and I mean, and even as a form of protest, it is relatively mild by the standards of what the Senate has seen on all sides, and even from the Greens. Like, the speech wasn't even interrupted. Like, she wasn't yelling things out. Like, there've been moments, we talk about this a lot when people talk about, the Greens have strayed from their roots. They used to be so nice and chill. Remember when Bob Brown and Kerry Nettle literally heckled George Bush, right? That was like, that attracted the same level of invective and fury and the debasement of Parliament and all that sort of bullshit was thrown at them. It was undeniably the right thing to do, right? It was the right thing then, and it is the right thing now. And I think, look, there is an obvious bias here in terms of my relationship with Mehreen, but if any other senator had done this, I would have this exact same view, and that is that one of these people, if we're talking about Mehreen versus Penny or an Albanese, one of these people will go down in history as someone who stood up against the genocide of Palestinians, and the others will go down in history as people who attack them for doing so. And that's just a fact. That is a fact now, and it'll be a fact in 100 years. It'll be a fact in 1,000 years. And if that's the side Labor wants to be on, that's on them.
Man. And yeah, I mean, you say genocide, we say genocide. The debate, as far as I can tell, is broadly over in regards to whether what Israel is doing in Gaza right now is a genocide. We've had, world-class genocide scholars, including Israeli genocide scholars, identify this with clearly what it is. But that term is still not being used by the vast majority of the Australian media, like the mainstream media that I know you've been looking at a lot on Lamestream, and by any member of the government. And it always comes back to that to me. Like, when The Age did that editorial about how it was inappropriate for people to keep doing the protests after the wake of those anti-Semitic attacks, did not mention the G word at all whatsoever. And as soon as you do that, as soon as you actually acknowledge the fact of what's happening before us in real time, this live stream genocide, everything else just seems so ridiculous. Like, we are witnessing one happening before our eyes right now. Of course, we should be doing everything. And the idea that you would be I mean, some of these people are more upset and offended by Mehreen Faruqi's actions than they are by the actions of the state of Israel. Like, that's so clear to me. Like, based on their public comments, that's the only conclusion you can draw. But yeah, that just still, the G word still just hangs over all of it to me. Don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think now we've gotten to this point where after like nearly 2 years of refusing to acknowledge what's going on and attacking those who do, the problem the media and politicians, including the government, have is as soon as they say that, oh yeah, actually, you know, we have decided that there is a genocide going on, every action that they've criticized becomes not just valid, but like urgent and necessary.
Yes.
Like if you agree that there is a genocide taking place
Yes.
by being perpetrated by a country that we are still politically aligned to and you know, defenders of, notwithstanding some mild criticisms we've made, protesting is the least you can do.
Yes.
Holding up a sign in Parliament is the least you can do.
Yes.
So they've now got themselves in this bind where they have to double down on not acknowledging it. Otherwise, it exposes how hollow all their actions have been up until this point.
Love and solidarity to Senator Faruqi. I mean, she did put it, I think, said it perfectly. She said, "You're all on the wrong side of history. Instead of sanctioning me, maybe you should think about sanctioning Israel." I mean, fair enough.
Love and solidarity to me for not being able to, you know, go on a trip overseas now, funded by the Senate.
It's tough stuff.
To be clear, that was never on the card. That's not a thing I do. I don't go on trips with my mum, parliamentary funded. No Australian journalists listening to this, don't bother looking into that. It's a waste of your time.
On the media angle, I mean, did you see this Bernard Keane piece in Crikey where he published this email that had gone out from a senior staffer of a senior minister, at least, basically after the furor surrounding Mehreen Faruqi's actions and Penny Wong's statements and the government sort of censuring her? Bernard Keane said that they got sent out an email that said, this is for background use only, and basically here's what went down at the Senate, so this is how you should influence your reporting today, okay? The email read, "A bit went down in the Senate, which has a few people unclear about what actually happened. Here's a bit of an explainer to help your efforts to file. It's no secret that the Greens want to gain maximum attention, and the coalition, by seeking to amend the motion to suspend Senator Faruqi, would have given them exactly what they wanted. Both the Greens and coalition still want to reproduce the conflict here for their own political purposes. Neither have listened to the Australian people." So again, that's exactly what you're saying, is that, yes, Labor thinks we're in the sensible center on the old genocide and we're fucking nailing it. And these two idiots either side of us, the crazy left or the crazy right, they don't know what they're talking about. Australians are understandably distressed by the ongoing violence, including the deaths of so many innocent civilians. Just deaths that are just happening. But they also know that Australia is not responsible for what is happening in the Middle East. No one said that Australia was solely responsible for the situation in the Middle East. Everyone is saying that we should do everything within our power to try and stop Israel from doing what it's doing, because what it's doing is a genocide. I mean, I hate that
language.
Gross.
It's so infantilizing, you know. Australians are sad. We get that. But they also know that we're not responsible at all. It's crazy. Good on Bernard Keane for exposing the way that, you know, these political staffers try to manipulate the message. This is something that I've dealt with in my career, and it's become way worse in the last few years, where politicians in particular will give you so much information on background. And what that means is you then, if you don't include that information, they can then make complaints, both editorially and legally, and say, but we gave you this stuff.
Right.
If you didn't use it, that's a problem for you as a journalist, because you had information that you didn't publish. But because it's not on the record, you can't actually quote someone saying it, and therefore you can't quote someone to present a different perspective. You basically just have that massaged into your story. It's a really insidious way that this operates. And too many journalists, I think, put up with it because I think they're lazy and they just want to curry favor with powerful people. So for Keane to actually expose the mechanisms through which your stories are made and the way that the government uses its resources to do that, I think is a really good move from him.
Yeah, he's saying there's public interest in knowing that this is how the government is trying to spin their actions here.
Exactly.
And he also, you know, the Crikey does not refrain from calling Israel's war genocidal, which is exactly what it is too. So full credit to Crikey on that front, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
This also came along with another story about just how out of touch the Parliamentary Labor Party is with its own membership base. All right. This is a pretty big story. Anger is rising among Labor's base over the war in Gaza, with nearly 80 local branches passing motions over recent weeks calling for Australia to impose sanctions on the Netanyahu government and sever military ties with Israel, which is what the Greens have been calling to for the past couple of years. It's so weird. Maybe these Labor branch members could do ABC Vote Compass and they might find themselves changing their vote. The branches include one in Foreign Minister Penny Wong's home city of Adelaide and 3 in Prime Minister Anthony Albanese's Sydney electorate of Grayndler. Strong words are not enough, the conveners of the Labor Friends of Palestine group said in a letter sent to Wong on Wednesday and seen by this masthead. Expressions of concern and repeated calls for restraint have achieved little in the last 21 months. Indeed, Israel's violence and clear disdain for international humanitarian law have only intensified. So almost 80 local branches. Again, how powerful are local branches? How much do the apparatchiks of the Labor Party give a shit about what ordinary Labor members think? I don't know. Do you think this is going to make much of a difference at all? Or it's good to see it being reported publicly anyway, I suppose.
Yeah, I think the conveners of Labor Friends of Palestine said it best themselves. Strong words are not enough. Like, it's kind of ironic that they're critiquing Labor sending essentially a angry email to Benjamin Netanyahu as they are sending an angry email to Anthony Albanese. I know that there is some debate amongst like kind of activist circles about whether, we should be friendly to and supportive of Labor Friends of Palestine. And obviously good on them for caring about this and agitating. But I kind of think we're nearly 2 years into your government, not only like doing very little to stop or to criticize what's going on in Israel, but actually attacking the people who are and at different levels, at state and federal level, criminalizing protest, right? Slandering and censuring the Greens for protesting it. At some point, you've just got to realize maybe actually if we all left en masse and instead of handing out how to vote cards for Albanese, who is refusing to call it a genocide, we campaigned to get rid of him. Imagine if Hannah Thomas won the seat of Grayndler on a platform of a free Palestine. Would that have more of an impact on changing Australia's position on this issue? Or would writing a letter? It seems pretty obvious to me, what would actually have a real political threat to Labor here. So, yeah, I mean, like, again, it's better than doing nothing, but I don't think it'll change a single thing.
I mean, the government said that Australia just joined 27 nations to demand an immediate end to the war and condemn Israel's drip feeding of aid to Gaza on Tuesday. I've been enjoying this too, this sort of, everyone seems very happy to talk about, there's not enough aid getting through and people are starving. That's absolutely true. And that's a correct thing to say. Yeah. Very little comment about why they need aid so much. Like, why suddenly do the people of Gaza are just so desperately in need of aid? Very little comments about the fact that the Israeli government is stopping aid getting in and is ethnically cleansing them from their homelands. That seems to be like quite an important detail that could also do with a fair bit of condemnation, I would say.
Yeah, everyone's acting as though all of a sudden there's just this random aid crisis. Like, there hasn't been a drought or anything. This is politically, confected.
Yes.
This is deliberate. This is a deliberate tactic being used. I don't look again. Actually, you know what? I'm not even going to like caveat it. Like, signing the statement is irrelevant now. Again, we're nearly 2 years into this. Netanyahu, Israel, they know that they can withstand these statements. They understand. And often they are telegraphed in advance. Often governments like Australia's will tell the Israeli government in advance that, hey, we're about to do this. The only thing that impacts the way that these countries operate is when you cut ties, you cut military economic ties. It is why we have done that with countries like Russia. We have sanctioned them, we've done all sorts of things. We do that. It's not a crazy idea. So why are we doing it in some countries and not for others who are acting? This might be controversial to some people. It is, you don't have to be fucking pro-Russia or pro whatever Russia's doing in Ukraine to recognize that what is happening in Israel is an order of magnitude worse. And so it just brings up the kind of stark difference in terms of how we are treating the Putin government and how we're treating Israel.
Yeah.
Drew Hutton, welcome to 7:30.
Hello, Sarah.
What do you mean that the Greens have been taken over by a cult?
Well, there are plenty of really good people in the Greens, and I still identify as having Green politics. Always have had, always will have. But over the last decade or so, it would seem that some people have come into the Greens with the determination to take it over, to convert it into the sort of party one of whose main preoccupations is with transgender rights. Now, I've got no problem with transgender rights, but what they've done is they have a closed set of beliefs. They have a closed language, which they understand, but nobody else does. And they've got an absolutely rigorous determination to stop any dissent from occurring to the things that they think are important. And the main things they think are important are that we get rid of the notion of biological sex and replace it with gender identity.
All right, finally, let's talk about one Mr. Drew Hutton. Have you followed this particular drama? You've been following the Tasmanian state election. You've been following your mum in Parliament. Have you been following the ins and outs of the Drew Hutton saga, Osman?
Tom, what do you think I do all day? Of course I've been following the Drew Hutton media story. I've been following weird Facebook posts that people I used to, know in the Greens are making about all of this stuff. I remember Drew Hutton when I was more involved. I'm not involved in the party at all anymore, but when I was quite active, 10 or 12 years ago, Drew Hutton, I think he was involved in Lock the Gate or anti-coal seam gas stuff around then. He wasn't super into the party. But he kind of had a bit of a reputation. It was kind of, Drew was kind of important in setting up the Queensland Party back in the day, but he's kind of going a bit weird now and he's kind of conservative and we don't really listen to him that much. And it's good on him for going out there and helping farmers stop coal seam gas mining. That was 10 years ago, right? That was the Drew Hutton sort of vibe. So it's been very perplexing for me to see everywhere from The Guardian to 730 to The Australian do these, I would say, very sympathetic stories about the founder of the Greens being expelled by this crazy band of queer and trans radicals who are taking the party away from its environmental direction. I think, and I'm sorry if I'm stepping on what you're going to say here, but the Drew Hutton story, at least in terms of how it's being discussed by the media, is really not about Drew Hutton. It's really the media trying to confect or perpetuate its narrative that the party has lost its way and is being hijacked by radicals. I don't think that one guy getting kicked out for being deeply anti-trans is indicative of any crisis in the Greens. I think the Greens got a lot of other issues and I think they need to deal with those issues, but I'm not sure this is the example that will bring the party down.
Well, that's because you don't know enough about cults, Osman, and you're not clearly prepared to take on these evil rainbow cult members, these rainbow witches that are destroying the Australian Greens. But yes, a little bit of background. We've discussed this briefly on the show, and look, Emerald might have some more thoughts that I've made that she might not be allowed to share next week. I don't know. But next week, when she's back, she might have some more thoughts about this whole saga. But yes, we've discussed this. Drew Hutton, co-founder of the Australian Greens, played a massive role in the history of the Queensland Greens, and I think, broadly speaking, was widely respected as a pretty dedicated an incredible environmental campaigner who, yes, helped establish the Lock the Gate Alliance. And yes, on that front, has a whole amount of respect from lots of different people. I think Bob Brown called him a titan. His dedication to the Green movement in Australia is pretty undeniable. He was a lifetime member of the Australian Greens, but that is not the case anymore. Last weekend, the decision by the Queensland Greens member dispute body, the Constitution and Arbitration Committee, the CAC, to terminate Hutton's life membership was upheld by the State Council, which means that he has now officially been expelled from the party and the appeal process is over. This is the end of a very long dispute resolution process that stems back to 2022, when Hutton refused to delete transphobic comments made by others commenting on a Facebook post he wrote about the way the Victorian Greens was dealing with issues surrounding the debate around trans rights and how the party was dealing with that. These comments used transphobic language. I don't think there's much denying of that, including claims that trans women posed a threat in women-only facilities, comments which breached the Greens Code of Ethics, which all members are required to comply. Now, weirdly, Drew Hutton agreed to delete some of the comments on that post, but there were some that he did not want to delete, and he did that on free speech grounds. He says that he supports trans rights, but he opposes what he calls an attempt to stifle debate within the party. He then spent this past week, as you mentioned, talking to every media outlet in the fucking country, it seemed, getting a very good run all over the place, claiming that the party has now lost its focus on environmental issues, that we had become authoritarian and aggressive. It was making us weird and unlikable, and we've been taken over by a transgender and queer cult. That is a direct quote, which is pretty disgusting and remarkable, really. Former leaders Bob Brown and Christine Milne have criticised Hutton's expulsion and called for his membership to be returned.
I'm looking at it right now. Seriously, talk about the queer cult of the Greens.
Hey, yeah, that's fair. That's probably fair. For its part, Greens party officials released a statement insisting that trans rights are non-negotiable human rights, and Greens leader Larissa Waters has said this was a decision that was reviewed by the party, taken by volunteer party members, many of whom uphold the code of conduct on a regular basis. It's not hard to uphold the code of conduct, which I think is again, that's a slam for Lewis Waters, but it's like, it is a pretty reasonable position to take, is that I'm sure if you look at the code of conduct, and anybody can appreciate that, yes, debate and disagreement around policy issues is fine. That's an important part of politics and the way that policy is developed. But there are certain rules, there are certain red lines around language, and yes, and there's a code of conduct that we all sign up to as Greens members, and it's really not hard to keep that. And Drew Hutton could avoid the situation by simply deleting the transphobic comments in question. I mean, you're giving us a taste of your take generally, but I mean, yeah, what do you make of this whole saga, and how popular it does seem to be with the Australian media? How much they fucking love it.
One thing that really frustrated me in terms of both Drew Hutton's kind of analysis of the issue and how the media were keen to run with this was this idea of free speech, right? So Drew Hutton saying the Greens are clamping down on free speech. My free speech has not been respected. And the media is like, this is outrageous. The Greens hate free speech, right? There's a couple of things on that. Firstly, political parties are voluntary organizations that have a set of beliefs and values. And if you don't subscribe to those beliefs and values, they are well within their rights to sanction you for that or to kick you out. All political parties do this. The Liberal Party expels people whose values don't align with it. Yes. The Labor Party expels people who publicly criticize it. The Greens have previously expelled people. This is not a free speech. Drew Hutton is not attempting to get a job in an arts institution or in a university or in a media organization and express these views. He's trying to go against the political values of the party. And he might not like the direction the Greens have gone on this issue. That's entirely within his right, but he's not allowed to be angry at a fundamental belief the Greens hold, which is that trans and queer rights are very, very important and fundamental to the party. He's not allowed to be angry at that and still retain his Greens membership and criticize the party. That's a rule of the party. That's fine. That's how it operates. So it is very weird to me that he, one, is so angry about this, and two, the media are willing to let him run this argument because it seems intellectually shallow. Like, surely people understand how political parties work. And then on the broader issue of free speech, none of these outlets give a shit about free speech. Then they're not there standing up for the free speech of artists or academics or journalists or public servants or anyone else who has been found themselves in trouble for expressing, views on Israel's genocide in Gaza. So it's just kind of hypocrisy from every single person involved. And I think, like I said earlier, I think there's the things driving this are, one, there's a broad contempt in the community and in the media for trans people. There just is, right? So they look at this as an opportunity to kick the trans community through, now we've got a Greens elder who also hates trans people. This makes our views slightly less kind of abhorrent. And then on top of that, they also get to do a story about division within the Greens. And I think what's actually really fascinating about the Hutton thing is how few divisions there seem to be. I'm going to be one of the last people to defend some of the internecine Greens constitutional committees and processes and panels and stuff. They're all very complicated and weird, and they stress a lot of people out. But the Queensland Party seems to have followed a pretty rigorous process over a number of years here. And you're hard-pressed to find MPs or officials or even any significant number of members that think the wrong thing happened. The Greens seem relatively firm on this. And I think there's actually an amazing result for a party that is as chaotic and diverse as the Greens. So I'm not just trying to say this to, just be a Greens booster for the sake of it, because as you know, I have lots of problems with the party and will continue to critique them on various levels. But on this one issue, it seems to have held together pretty well, and it seems to have done the right thing by getting rid of a guy who's refusing to stop publicly attacking the trans community. That does not seem to be a controversial position for the party to take.
Yeah, it's very hard to believe Drew Hutton's claim that this was an unfair dispute resolution process. It probably went on too long. I think from the outside, knowing all that I know, I'm like, well, we probably don't want these things to drag out for years and years. That is probably fair enough. That would be a frustrating process, but everything within the party bureaucracy takes too long, and it's a broadly volunteer and member-run organization, which means that things do take a long time. So that's probably fair enough. But there were two allegations against Drew Hutton initially from the first his post read, "I believe in full human rights for trans people at the same time as supporting the right of women to be safe from patriarchal oppression." Now, I might quibble with some of the implications of that particular statement, but anyway, that was his post, and then we had these transphobic comments in there. an allegation against him was made that he breached the party's code of ethics by demeaning trans women as a group, and that complaint was not upheld. The second complaint was that he was providing a platform for anti-trans rhetoric, and that was the complaint that was upheld. Okay, so even within this process, there's a level of nuance, and some people made some allegations which was not upheld by the same process, and another one that was. There was an appeal process, and again, all these opportunities were offered to Drew Hutton to potentially resolve this and to recognize what it means to be, to refuse blatantly to delete these kind of comments and stuff. So yeah, the process itself might have dragged on far too long, and we could probably have a better way of dealing with it maybe, but it doesn't seem like he's been dealt an unfair hand here. It really does seem like they've done everything they can to try and make this happen while still standing true to the party's values and their, fierce commitment to trans rights. And this is the thing, and tell me if I'm crazy here, and if I'm being, this is some white ridiculousness, but it does seem to me that when it comes to LGBTQ rights, there does seem to be these like gray areas and these debates around what those rights look like that we don't necessarily, where the nuance is not necessarily applied to something like race, right? Like racist comments should get people suspended from a party, no question. Whereas when it comes to trans rights or the rights of gay people a long time ago, it does seem people seem a little bit more, it's a little bit more like, well, there's an open debate here and people can have lots of different opinions, as opposed to saying, no, this is an identity like any other that should be protected and we're going to be unequivocal in our commitment to those people's rights. Does that make sense?
Look, I won't say that's white nonsense. I think there's a risk sometimes when we talk about these things and trying to compare, them. You can sometimes, and you might not be as aware of them or have interacted with them as much. Even within left-wing political parties like the Greens, there can be a lot of, and this was my experience, like a lot of criticism of the acknowledgement that race does play a role in marginalizing people and the ways you define that. Like that does exist. But I think you are right that right now in particular, particularly in the Greens, there is more of an understanding that yes, racism exists and we should try to actively resist that in all forms, whereas LGBTQI rights have become more of the battleground, right, in terms of how do we resist the marginalization of these communities. And I think that's driven, the kind of anti-trans hate campaign, which is strongest on the far right and, but exists across the entire political spectrum. I think what is frustrating to see that happen is we've been here before. Like you mentioned, like gay liberation, like the same accusations were waged at the Greens in the 90s when they were campaigning for same-sex marriage and for the recognition of queer people's right to exist and to live free from discrimination. And people said, that's a crazy lefty radical issue. Let's just focus on cutting down trees. I don't understand why people can't see the parallels and the similarities. And I do find, like, I'm not naive. I understand where the hate for these communities comes from. I'm not pretending that like it's just, it's made up or whatever. But I think within parties like the Greens, why people can't recognize that they're falling for the same kind of Sky News bullshit that they attack everyone else for falling for. Like the Nationals have been captured by Net Zero because they just watch Sky News after dark. Same with you idiots. Like you're worried about shit like bathrooms. That's not a real thing. That's what Sky News is saying. So how can you say that you're better than the kind of far right when you're repeating those same arguments internally?
Very hard to follow again. Yeah, it does. Thank you. Yes. And thank you for saving me from myself. But no, I think that was very well put. And it's very hard for me to follow exactly where Drew Hutton lands because he seems to give all the qualifiers. I support full human rights for trans people. I've got no problem with trans people. I've got no problem with trans rights. It's just about freedom of speech in the debate. But then writing for The Australian, which is a problem, but he said,
wow.
The cult position is that people are whatever gender they define themselves as, and anyone who disagrees with that position must be expelled, or if they are not party members, they should be otherwise cancelled. Okay, now, putting aside that sort of last remark about cancelling, whatever, I'm like, the idea that recognizing that people have a right to identify with the gender that they do, like that's kind of fundamental to the whole trans rights and giving humanity and dignity to trans people, Drew. I don't know how you sort of accept that there's an open debate around that particular question while also claim that you think that, trans people should get full human rights. I mean, that's, acknowledging and respecting people's rights to define and identify their own gender. That's kind of the whole thing. Am I wrong?
Yeah, there's an inherent contradiction. I think he's just trying to confuse people, right? He's trying to say, look, I believe in these broad motherhood statements, but when you get to the specifics, he's echoing the kind of, Jermaine Greer talking points that are the pointy end of this, that impact how trans people live and the rights that they have.
I also found it very frustrating. Drew Hutton was saying, oh, the cult has taken over the party, but also making all these complaints about democracy, right? He's sort of saying, oh, they've taken over all these different positions within the party. I'm like, well, people get positions in the Greens party by running and by being elected, right? Like they're quite big on that. So that's actually internal party democracy, which I think is correct. And he's also calling on Larissa Waters to intervene, right? Now, Larissa Waters, who I have a lot of respect for, friend of the show, has not been elected by the membership to be the leader of the party. I think the media can't quite deal with this either. They're getting Larissa Waters on being like, are you going to intervene here? Explain yourself. It's like, that's literally not how the system works. I think it's a good way the system works. We are a member-run party, and the leader of the parliamentary party doesn't get to intervene and override the decision of a state-based disciplinary system, right? That would be deeply undemocratic in my view.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the other thing that this whole saga exposes is still how little the mainstream media understand or is interested in understanding the way the Greens work. It's kind of absurd to me that you have political journalists whose entire career it is allegedly to explain to the public how politics works.
Yeah.
The Greens have been around for a very long time, are not going anywhere, have enormous influence and power, whether people like it or not. And very few, if any, political journalists understand the decision-making structures within the party, the factional tensions within the party, the ideological, divisions within the party, any of this stuff. And so what ends up happening is when you get something like the Drew Hutton story emerge, people are just like, well, this guy seems angry at the Greens, tick. He seems kind of aligned with our general worldview, tick. And he seems willing to publicly attack the Greens, tick, tick, tick.
Yeah.
Right? And then that just drives, that's how this stuff tends to get reported, and very few other perspectives are brought into the mix. It's an ongoing frustration, but like, hey, that's why Serious Danger is like a successful popular podcast. It's why people are ditching the news and going to news influence. It's why people listen to Lamestream, because they understand that we get how these things work. We might not always agree with everything going on within a left-wing political party, but at least we treat them with the same level of respect that you treat any political party, because they are a real political force, and we kind of understand how they operate better than anyone else.
Yeah. Last thing to say, and Lucifer said this as well, it's just very sad, right? It's obviously I fundamentally disagree with Drew Hutton on this particular issue, and I think he's losing the plot a little bit with some of these comments, and I think it's really, it's really gross the way he's going about doing this in many ways. But I can understand from his point of view, he's dedicated almost his entire life to this movement, played a crucial role in setting up the party, and is now on the outer. That must be pretty difficult. And I also said a lot of love and compassion to all the trans members of the Greens and trans people generally who have to put up with so much fucking shit in this toxic transphobic society of ours, looking at the one political party that is consistent and has stood up for trans rights across the board, still, getting embroiled in these issues all the time. So I'm thinking of them primarily, and then also hoping that the party can find a way out of this. Because I don't want old greenies who are invested in the party to fuck off. I want them to join the fight for justice for everybody and recognize what social justice means now, and recognize that our trans siblings deserve the dignity and the rights that everybody else does, for God's sakes. That's what I hope.
Yeah, that's right. And if there's one thing the Greens could do, and like I really don't want to criticize them on this because I think largely the party's sort of done the right thing, but I think it's a reminder that none of us can take any of this stuff for granted. Like if we want to liberate everyone who's marginalized and oppressed, we have to make the case for that. And it's sometimes frustrating, and we don't want to have to explain things that seem second nature to us. Like everyone deserves the same rights, regardless of their gender identity, their sexual preference, or whatever. But we have to make that argument. We just have to, because we're kind of losing that fight. So we're going to have to do the hard work. And Greens politicians, Greens members need to be communicating to their neighbors, to their colleagues, to politicians, to other activists, hey, this is why this stuff matters more now than ever.
Here. Osman Faruqi, thank you so much for being my guest co-host. It is always a pleasure to talk to you. Everyone check out Lamestream Pod. At Lamestream Pod is on the socials. You got on YouTube. You can subscribe to the podcast. There's like a newsletter thing that you got going on as well. Is that right?
Yeah, weekly newsletter. Check it out, lamestream.com.au.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening, everybody. Emerald will be back next week. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Thank you, Tom. Bye.
Serious danger to Australia.